Thank you very much. Well, first of all, what a delight to be here and to see all of the work that's going on in the Action for Happiness, and it's fantastic with our colleagues here doing all this fantastic stuff. So tonight we're going to be doing the relationship between compassion and happiness a little bit. So Mark said you do some practical things. So we're going to do some practical things. I'm going to tell you a story first, though. It's a nice little story. One day there was a... This is a story how compassion can change you, but you've got to be careful with it, right? So one day there was a lady who was a little overweight, and she was rushing around at work, and she tripped on the stairs and knocked her head and had a concussion. And in that, she had a vision that she went to heaven and she saw God. And she said, "Oh, that's it then, I'm done for." And he said, No, you're not done for, but you do need to be more compassionate to yourself, you need to look after yourself, treat yourself with kindness, use your body as a temple, So when she came around from the concussion, she thought, right, that's what I'm doing, I'm going to be compassionate. So she went on some happiness retreats. She went on a diet, she went running, and for the last little bit, she had some plastic surgery. She came out of the surgery and sadly was knocked over by the bus, you see. So she ends up in heaven, and she said, "God, you told me I had 40 years." And he said, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I never recognized you." One of the things that I'm going to highlight today is this very fact, that if we look at human history, we can be one of the most awful, terrible, nasty species that have ever lived. Okay? If you look at the Roman games, if you look at the Holocaust, if you look at what's happening in Syria, humans are potentially a very, very nasty species indeed. But compassion can change you. And compassion can change the way our minds work. So I'm going to take you on this journey. Now, before I do, we're going to do a little exercise together so you can get a feel of how compassion can actually change you. So I'm going to ask you just to talk to the person next to you for 2 minutes about one of life's small, not too big, disappointments. Something that you're disappointed about or something you've had a difficulty with, but a small thing, nothing too big, right? And the instruction is, one of you will be an A and one of you will be a B. Okay? So A will talk to B, and B has to stay silent. It's great fun in this room because it's very difficult to be silent, as you're going to hear a bubble. But just listen. You're not allowed to say anything. You can use your facial expressions and you can say, but you're not allowed to say anything. Okay? So you're just going to be listened to for 2 minutes. And then I'm going to sound my bells. I have some bells here. And then B will talk to A for 2 minutes about a little life disappointment or difficulty. Nothing too major. And then I'm going to sound my bell, and we're going to just put that exercise on the back burner until later in the workshop, in the talk, okay? Right, have you got it? Okay. Okay. So now, change. So now B talks to A. And remember, A, you can't say anything. You just listen, okay? Just B talks to A. So, 2 minutes, B talking to A about a slight disappointment or life difficulty. Okay, well done. Okay, well done. Okay, so just tuck that experience away for the time being. And you might want to reflect what it's like just to be listened to without anybody chattering back at you. and what it's like to be listening, so you can't chatter back. What's the pressure to get in and talk? So this is quite important, the experience of being listened to. It's a really important experience to be just listened to. It's a bit difficult in a room like this, obviously, but I wanted to just give you just a taste of that. Okay, so now let's think about compassion. So what I'm going to do is to talk for about 20 minutes, half an hour, take you through the basic principles of how we think about compassion from an evolutionary and biological point of view, and then take you through some exercises in grounding and compassion focusing, and then we'll see how we are. So the first thing really is to recognize that for many thousands of years the contemplative traditions have been focusing on the nature of mind through observation. And more recently the West has been developing scientific understanding of the mind and the brain. And for a long time, really, these two approaches never really came together. But now they are coming together because we have become a lot more interested in the science of compassion, pro-social behavior, and happiness. So previously we used to study things like aggression and depression and anxiety. In the last 10, 20 years, we've become very interested in this, the more what we call positive psychology is sometimes called. So what can these two different approaches have to offer each other? Well, I think one of the first things, and the point that Mark made, is the recognition that happiness is an interconnected process. In other words, there's the happiness that you can see of others, and there's the happiness that you might want to create for others. There's the happiness that others create from you, for you. So they're interested in creating happiness for you. And how do you react to that? And then there's, of course, there's your own self-happiness. And in the middle, of course, we know that culture is very important in the creation of flow. We know that in our culture, in some of our schools and hospitals, tragically, actually, what's happening here is not a creation of happiness flow, but an inhibition, because all of these processes have what we call facilitators and inhibitors. There are things you can block up this flow, and there are things that you can help create this flow. One of the wonderful things that Lord Layard and Mark and others are doing is to create flow by thinking about this process. And it turns out that the happiness you create for others actually has an impact on your own experience of happiness. So the thing is that all motivations have what we call facilitators and inhibitors, and it's the same for happiness. There are things that will inhibit it. And this is very important because there's no point in creating a lot of facilitators if you also create a lot of inhibitors. And certainly government after government, I'm afraid, in the NHS has tried to create compassionate facilitators, but they also create a lot of inhibitors, things that get in the way. And these inhibitors relate to what we call fears, blocks, and resistances. Now, in the work that I do as a clinical psychologist, we actually have people who are frightened of feeling happy. They're frightened of positive emotion. For example, they may have an idea that, well, if I feel positive emotion today, something bad is bound to happen tomorrow. Or I don't deserve to be happy. If you knew what I'd done or what I think, what I feel about myself, you wouldn't think I deserve to be happy. So you can get all kinds of blocks and resistances. And of course, one of the inhibitors of happiness is suffering. And compassion, of course, that's what it's designed to address. So why do we need compassion? Well, we need compassion because life is hard, you see. We don't want to see you like this after the talk today. Okay, so what do we mean by compassion? Let's get this out of the way first, because there's a lot of strange ideas about what compassion is, that it's a bit of kindness or a bit of this, bit of that. Kindness is okay, but it's not the same as compassion, right? If I remember your birthday or I buy you a present that you have always wanted, that would be kindness, but you wouldn't call it compassion, okay? If you think about Christ's sacrifice on the cross, I'm not saying this from a religious point of view because I'm not religious, but you probably wouldn't say what a kind person he was. You'd talk about that as the compassion of Christ, the courage of Christ. So this is important. So compassion and kindness completely overlap, of course, to some degree, but compassion is the sensitivity to suffering, this preparedness to turn towards suffering rather than away from it, and a commitment to try to relieve and prevent it. Now, these two psychologies are really important. One without the other isn't going to work. So if I see somebody fall into a fast-flowing river and I think, I must save them, that's sensitivity and it's a lot of courage, and I jump, and halfway through my jump I think, damn, I can't swim. Okay, that's what we... So we wouldn't have this bit, you see. If I want to be a doctor, I think I'd love to be a doctor, and I can imagine healing people with diseases, and I'd be happy to go to places where there are horrible diseases. They're great, fantastic. But actually, I can't be bothered to study, really. I just turn up and do what I feel, you know what I mean? So the point about compassion is we're often forgotten is this wisdom, the wisdom element. Now, in the Buddhist tradition, it's called bodhicitta. Now, bodhicitta means the preparedness to become enlightened in order to enlighten others, right? So compassion is not just intention. That's great. Obviously, that's important. But it's also intention to acquire the skills to know what to do. And this is really important, and I think this comes up in the action for happiness. It's not just wanting to be happy, it's actually finding out how to do it, because it's not always so easy. So this means you have these two psychologies. Firstly is the preparedness to approach, and that means developing courage, and also the dedication. So courage and dedication in our model are key to compassion. Okay, so in our model, compassion is the most courageous of all of your motives. If you think compassion is soft, you've misunderstood it. It is the most courageous because you are going to turn towards suffering. You're going to address it. You're not going to turn away. And that can be painful. So compassion then is interested in the big questions, the nature of reality and how we fit into it. And this means that we have to understand the nature and the causes of suffering. Why do we suffer as human beings? Why do we suffer? And in reality, the causes are to do with two. Firstly, because we are evolved biological beings. We're not going to stay here very long. I think you've got about 30,000 days. Sorry about that. I'll do that. And then we're off. So we are a cycling biological organism that comes into existence and goes out. And as part of that, we come with a preparedness of being. So if we start at the beginning, then we can start with the universe is about 13.8 billion years old, and the Earth is about 4.5 billion years old. And during the history of the Earth, there's actually been 4 major extinctions, and at least 2 of them, intelligent life was evolving. So had those extinctions not happened, you and I wouldn't be here. A totally different species would be here, maybe sailing around the stars in Star Trek-like spacecraft. No, do we really? So it's all very fragile, this. And here we are. This is we're right up here, look. So we are part of what is called the flow of life. We are particular types of DNA that create these bodies. And that's important because in creating these bodies, our DNA creates things that are good, but also things that are problematic. And this is called trade-off. So in every biological form, there is a trade-off. Something that is good, but something that is not so good. And in the human brain, trade-offs are a serious problem to humanity, as I will say. So your skeleton actually evolved in the sea and is designed as a coat hanger. And for many animals, they still operate as a coat hanger with all fours. If you watch chimpanzees, when they want to run, they run on all fours, or they walk with their legs apart. Humans, however, evolved standing up. So they stood up like this, right? For arms free, hands free, and a good head movement and good body movement. See, I can do that, look. It's amazing, right? All that fantastic flexibility. Except, I'm terribly sorry, ladies, it was a very bad idea for you. Because when we stood up, the birth canal narrowed right at the time when the baby's head was evolving to get bigger. What? Who designed that? So the point is that it turns out that the female birth process is the most dangerous and painful of all primates. It's a trade-off, right? A trade-off. And that's why, incidentally, females often have to have help in giving birth. It can be quite tricky. And it's kind of interesting because that also may have contributed to the evolution of carers in childbirth. So in many societies, women have their aunts and their grandmothers and mothers around to help the birth and so on. But it's a trade-off. Now, trade-offs are really important because Trade-offs mean that we can have all of these kind of problems going on. We are quite capable of all this stuff, but we can also be capable of this stuff. And in the Buddhist traditions, it's very much about we have a series of potentials for good and for bad. And in fact, there's a nice little advert.
We are thoughtful. We are thoughtless. We are kind. And we are cruel. We are creative, destructive, brave, stupid. We are heroes, villains, visionary, and we are blind. We are responsible and responsible. We are all what we have done and what we will do. So we all have a duty to do the right thing. We are no different.
Sorry about that. But it is a nice advert because the point about it is humans are multiple. We are multiple. We have many potentials. People say sometimes, compassion is our true nature. But when the Buddhists talk about that, they're not talking about your biological nature. They're talking about the nature of mind. And that's a very different game altogether. So don't be confused when the Buddhists say our true nature is compassionate, because they're not talking about this. They're talking about up there. A different type of consciousness. Okay, so that we are these multiple things. Now, the point about it is we are built by our genes, and this is really important because I have 2 arms and 2 legs because that's been brought by my genes. And certainly in psychotherapy, this key idea that we are genetically created is very important because people don't realize that so is the brain. It's genetically created to have certain kinds of feelings and motives. You didn't create it. It's not created by you, so don't own it. Don't fuse with it. Your brain is very similar to everybody else's brain in the world, and you're capable of all of that you've seen there. You're quite capable of all of that stuff. Okay, the key issue is not that you're capable of it. That's not the issue. The issue is how you learn to drive it. Now, this is important in therapy because we say to our patients sometimes, look, you have to put food in one end here and something rather nasty comes out the other end. That's not your fault, right? You've been designed that way. And if you try and stop it, you're going to get into trouble, get very big suddenly. So don't start trying to stop it. But you don't fuse with it. You don't say, well, because I need to shit, therefore I'm a shitty person. You know what I mean? You don't say, I got shit. Oh, I'm such a shitty person. So the key is that your brain is also generating stuff all the time, anger or anxiety or passion or lust or blah, blah, blah. That is what your brain is doing because it's what it's designed to do. And if you've had certain kinds of upbringing, then that will sensitize it to certain kinds of productions, if you want. So this is very important, and I know Lord Layard and the other people in the room are very clear about mindfulness is the beginning of understanding, of diffusion, standing back from your mind and seeing, so this is what a mind is. This is how it works. So it's a genetic lottery, really. There you are, from your mum and your dad. And somebody once worked out that if every possible combination of genes from a couple became a human, each couple would have about 700 million children or something like that. A huge number of children. So even from your parents, you are a very, very rare combination of genes. Right? That combination that's made you would never happen again unless you're a twin, obviously, and that's not if you're a twin. So these are important things. And we all learn, we all come into this life and we learn that we're born, we grow, we decay. So all of us really are in a world which is full of potential suffering. Okay? And the question is whether we open our eyes to that or whether we close them. And we also know that we're socially constructed from the basic building blocks of our brain. So we say to our patients, look, if I had been kidnapped out of hospital as a 3-day-old baby, imagine that, into, say, a violent drug gang, and I grew up in a violent drug gang, I saw violence, I had violence against me, this version of Paul Gilbert wouldn't exist. totally different version would exist. Not only would this version not exist, but my genetic expression would be different. We now know that genes are changed by the environment in which they grow. Well, that's not quite true. Genes are not changed, but the expression of the gene is changed through a process called methylation. Would I have had a choice in that? No. So much of what we are and what we feel and was never our choice. So don't own it, right? So it's like having a car. Somebody gives you this car and you sit in this car. Now, if you don't learn how to drive it, it can be quite a dangerous thing. But if you learn how to drive it, it can be a good thing. So in compassion, it's about don't blame yourself for what's happening, but take responsibility. Key, right? If you start blaming yourself, I'm this person, I'm that person, then you get into all of that, then you're just going to go into depression. But if you can stand back, okay, I didn't design any of this, I don't particularly want it, but I'm going to learn how to drive the damn thing. That then sets your intention. I'm a human like all other humans, and I am capable of the best, and I'm capable of the worst. But I didn't design it that way. My responsibility is to learn how to drive my mind. All right? Now, the Dalai Lama has a very lovely story where he tells the story about when he was a young man, he used to like to fix watches. He loves watches and things, gadgets. He's a gadget person. So we were listening to him one day, and so he said, when I was 17, I used to like to make watches, and I had this beautiful watch. The travelers would go to Lhasa, and they'd given him the broken watches. And as a young, I don't know if you've read the autobiography of the Dalai Lama, but he had an irritable temperament. He's quite, had to work on it. So he was fixing this watch, beautiful watch, nearly fixed it, and then he dropped the screw into the middle of the mechanism. And in that moment of frustration, whatever the Tibetan for shit is, I don't know what it is, but whatever it is. So he picked up a hammer and smashed the watch. Okay, and then he looked at us and he said, well, the problem with that is no more watch. No more watch. In that moment of losing my mindfulness, my mind awareness of where my mind was, I had done exactly the opposite of my intention. My intention was to make a beautiful watch. Now there was no chance. I had smashed it. So this is the important thing, right? That mindfulness holds you to your intention. It holds you to your intention. So if you have your intention set on compassion, right, set on learning how to drive this rather crazy thing that can be incredibly damaging to you and other people, if you learn how to drive it, if that is your intention, then mindfulness will hold you. So that when you start to veer off, you're angry or whatever, just bring your mind back to your intention. And one of the things that's really important, I think, in the work that we do, is that people are very vague about their intention. What are you training to do in your life? What kind of person are you training to become? Now, of course, in the work that we do, we're wanting people to train to be compassionate. So the key thing then is, I won't worry about that too much. So the key thing is realizing then that you have a, where am I going? You have a old brain that you share with many other animals, and this brain has the capacities for harm avoidance, food, sex, caring, wanting status, fighting over territory, whatever it is. And these emotions are all basic, and these basic defensive behaviors and so on. That's all old brain stuff that you share with your Labrador. Your Labrador can do most of that. But you also have a 2 million year old, not much more than that, new brain, which has completely changed the game. It's absolutely changed the game because now you can self-monitor, you're able to self-praise or self-criticize, you can do all kinds of stuff. And self-monitoring is really profoundly important. Self-awareness, profoundly important. You'll never see a chimpanzee sitting under a tree taking their pulse thinking, oh my God, that's so fast. Or looking at their reflection in a lake thinking, God, have I put on weight? Humans can monitor. They can monitor stuff that's in their minds, in their bodies, in their behavior. They can monitor what other people are thinking about them in ways that no other animal can. But the problem with this stuff is it's great and it can do wonderful things, thinking, planning, science, culture, medicine, all that stuff, but it can also do some pretty bad things. This clever brain that's just been bolted onto these basic emotional systems, there it is, can really get us caught up in all kinds of loops. And many of the people that we work with that have mental health problems, they're caught up in this loop of thinking and feeling and feeling and thinking and thinking and feeling and thinking and feeling. So imagine a zebra getting away from a lion. What happens is when the stimulus is gone, so they can't smell, hear, or see the lion, they will calm down quite quickly. But humans bring the stimulus inside the head. So we, for example, can start to imagine and ruminate. So rather than just going back to eating, we'll start thinking, can you imagine if I'd been caught? Can you imagine if I'd been eaten by a lion? And suppose there's 2 lions tomorrow. Oh my God. And they could be at the water hole, and then I can't get any water, you know what I mean? And then I'm going to dehydrate because it's going to be a hot day tomorrow. I mean, it's going to be terrible. So, and then, of course, self-criticism. So why am I in lion-infected country when I could be in London at this compassion work? So then we do all this stuff. So the point about it is this typical ruminating, imagining the worst, and self-criticizing. These are the big 3, which actually really do drive people down into all kinds of suffering. The other thing to realize is that and why mindfulness is so important is because what you imagine, what you bring into mind will play in your body in a big, big way, right? We are a species that can really play our own bodies. This is fairly easy to demonstrate. Look, if you are hungry and you see a meal, if you're a meat eater, it'll be a steak. If you're a vegetarian, it'll be a stuffed pepper or something like that. You think, oh, look at the stuffed pepper, wow. Then you get this. You see, this is a pathway from the outside straight to your hypothalamus. In other words, your hypothalamus is designed to respond to that stimulus. But you can also just imagine a meal. Maybe late at night, you've got no money, you imagine it. Here's an easier one even. Imagine that you see something erotic on EastEnders or something like that. Then that stimulates your pituitary, releases hormones into your body, and you get arousal. But, of course, you don't need an outside. You can actually do it through imagination. Now, this is phenomenal, right? Absolutely phenomenal. That you, on purpose, can create an image that will stimulate a very small set of cells in your brain, your pituitary, and generate a whole series of changes in your body. Now, we all know that, but I don't think we appreciate just how profoundly important that is. I mean, there's an old joke, isn't there? What's the lightest thing in the world? The male penis, because it can be raised by thought alone. I mean, one of my clients, bless him, said to me, he said, "Oh, I know what you mean, Dr. Gilbert." He said, I much prefer fantasy because you meet a real better class of person, you know. All right, so this is powerful stuff, right? So imagine that somebody's being critical to you and hostile to you. That is going to stimulate your threat system, and then what you're going to fear is upset, depression, anxiety, maybe anger. But the point about it is you can do it for yourself. Now, the thing is, if you do this, right, be careful. If you want to be self-critical, be careful, because the people that I see have been very well practiced at self-criticism day in, day out. They're very good at self-criticizing themselves. But we've done brain studies. We've put people in scanners to see what happens in your brain when you're critical, and it's not good. People often think, oh, I need to criticize myself because... No, you don't. You need to learn self-correction. That's important. You need to learn to be compassionately at your best and try as best you can not to harm others and so on. But criticizing yourself, particularly with anger, hostility, and contempt, this is bad news. On the other hand, if people are kind to you and supportive of you when things go wrong, this stimulates a particular set of cells in your brain, periductal gray and various other things, and also part of your anatomical nervous system called your vagus nerve, okay, which is part of your parasympathetic system, which has a calming, supportive influence, okay? And therefore, why not learn to generate compassionate images, compassionate styles of thinking, compassionate focusing? Because we've done studies to show that when you do that, you stimulate brain pathways which are conducive to well-being. Okay, so that's really quite it's very simple. There's nothing really complicated about it. But we have this new brain. The point is, nobody teaches us or our children how to drive the damn thing. This is potentially quite a dangerous thing, right? Because it can do some really bad stuff, seriously bad stuff, as I said at the beginning. But it also can do some seriously wonderful stuff. The point is, people need to learn how to drive it and not think that it's something about them, but actually how they're going to work with the brain. So what to do? There we are, a little bit of mindfulness, you see. Learning to be mindful. Mindfulness allows you to start to pay attention to what's going on in your mind. And this audience probably is very experienced in understanding the process of mindfulness. So we begin to see the loops. We begin to see what arises as it arises in our mind. There we are. Very important. And one of the key things in this training that we do is that when you become mindful of nature's mind. It's nature, don't own it. You happen to be inhabiting this mind for 30,000 days, but it isn't yours because it's going to decay and die anyway. It's not going to last very long. There's no point knowing it, is there really? It's all over in a flash. But what you are experiencing is nature's mind. You are experiencing the rages, the jealousies, the sexual desires. This has been put into you because nature has designed a brain for you to feel it, right? So learn about it, by all means. This is nature's mind. Now, the other thing that's really quite important is this whole issue about the different types of emotion system, that we have very different types of evolved emotion system. And these emotion systems are profoundly important to us, really. So your most basic emotion system is called your threat system, and this is designed to come on rapidly, quickly, and to turn off positive emotion. Turns it off. So if you're in the jungle having fun chatting to your friend and you see or you hear a lion, you have to be immediately prepared for action. So your threat system is designed to operate quickly. There's no point in having a threat system that's slow. Well, is it a lion? Is it not a lion? Is it eaten? Is it not eaten? Can I run away? Can I not run away? I just have to think about this. Oh, my goodness, here it is. And it has to be better safe than sorry. So it'll do things. It'll assume the worst. And this is easily detected if you ever watch birds on a lawn or eating breadcrumbs on a lawn. They peck and they look and they look and they look. And they'll often fly away very quickly and leave the food behind. That's better safe than sorry. So it's better to leave a positive than to risk becoming somebody else's lunch, something else's lunch. So anxiety is very easy to stimulate and it sticks. And anger is also very easy to stimulate and then it sticks. Anger is a very sticky emotion, right? Very sticky indeed, through no fault of your own, right? If you go Christmas shopping and you go into 10 shops and in 9 of the shops the people are very kind to you and helpful to you, that's wonderful and you come out feeling really good and nice. You go into one shop and they're very rude. The assistant is talking to their friend behind the counter. And you wait a bit, and then you say, "Could you serve me, please?" And they look at you and they say, "Patience, sir, patience." Just talking to my friend. Okay, patience. Okay, I'll be with you in a minute. So then they turn to you and they start looking at their watch. Yes, what do we want? And you give them £20 and they give you change for 10. And you say, "I gave you £20. They say, "I can't tell you how many people pull that trick on me, sir. You did not give me £20. So anyway, the point is you come out of the shop steaming, you're very angry. So your arousal of anger has gone very high. The problem with it is it's very difficult to settle it. Through no fault of your own, it's just very hard. So who are you thinking about on your way home? Right? We know, don't you? That pain in the ass person, right? And when you get home and your partner comes home and they say, "What sort of day have you had?" And you say, "Oh, it's been not too bad. But do you know what happened to me?" Do you know there's this person in the shop, and they made me wait, and then they told me to have patience. I really did. So blah, 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 blah. So then your partner says, oh my God, that's terrible. Where do they get these people from? You know, blah, blah, blah. So now we have two angry people, pressure's going up, and blah, 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 blah. Because anger is sticky, right? You communicate it. I want to tell you how angry I am, right? You don't want any of this happiness stuff. No, man. The tragedy is 90% of people were kind to you. Why don't you remember them? Because your brain is not designed to, it's not your fault. But if you become mindful, and once you understand it's not my fault, but my brain will do this to me, that's its factory setting, okay? If I let it, but I actually want to drive it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, okay, that person really annoyed me. I can give myself 5 minutes of anger, that's fine. And now I'm going to remember every person who was helpful. And do it. You do this as an exercise, and you'll be quite surprised how it works. Practice remembering the people that were helpful to you, because there will be plenty of people that weren't, plenty of people that rude to you on the trains or wherever it is. They're easy. Your anger will stick. Okay? Rick Hansen says, our minds are like Velcro for the negatives and Teflon for the positives. So you have to train the mind. Okay? That's very important. The other thing that we know about this system, this green system, whoops, I haven't done the blue system, have I? Now, the blue system is very interesting because the blue system is your drive system, and if anything really good happens to you, you get a dopamine flush. And again, your body will lose control to this. So supposing that you win the European lottery and you're worth 100 million euros. Let's not be stoogey about it. Let's have a big one. You're worth 100 million euros this Friday. Is it this Friday? Yes, it's Friday, right? You wake up, you're worth 100 million euros. What is going to happen in your body? You'll have a heart attack, yes. Yes, that's right, because your heart rate will go boom. You won't be able to stop it. It's not under your control. All right? You will have a mild hypomania. You'll become agitated and excited. You won't be able to stop smiling. You won't be able to sleep for a few nights. You won't be able to stop it. In other words, your body is designed, when you have a massive input of a resource, to become dopamine flooded. It's not your fault. It's difficult. These are difficult to control, these feelings. I remember one day telling one of my clients about this who was a bit paranoid, and they looked at me in horror and they said, oh no, Dr. Gilbert, no, think of all the people that would want to come and kill you for your money. Sorry, okay. Bad example for you. Sorry. Scratch that. So now the problem with this system is that this system is a relatively short-lived system, because when you have, even when people who win the lottery, we know that you follow them up a few months later or 6 months later, and they're no happier than they were before they got it. But a lot of the things that give us dopamine rushes, the pleasures of life, are very short-lived, the chocolate cake or whatever it is. But we live in a society where that kind of pleasure is peddled as happiness, and it's an illusion. It's a serious illusion, but it's quite useful because it sells goods and services and so forth. Now, there's another system over here, which we call the soothing system, and this system works through grounding us, okay, and slowing the whole process down. This is linked to what we call the parasympathetic system, okay? And the parasympathetic system is a grounding system which allows your body to slow down. Now, somewhere, I've got a picture of it here somewhere. There it is. So your sympathetic system is involved in your threat, mostly involved in your threat, and also your drive system, and this is activating system for anxiety or whatever. But your parasympathetic system is linked to what is called the rest and digest system. Now, what's really interesting about the parasympathetic system, it's very locked into kindness. All right? It's very locked into compassion. It's very locked into helpfulness. So if you imagine a child who's distressed, what do? They go to the parent, who then gives them a hug and a cuddle and talks to them kindly in the ear, and that has the effect of calming them down. So we're biologically very sensitive to signals of kindness. And from the day that you're born to the day that you die, the kindness of others will have a huge impact on the quality of your life, and the quality of your body actually has an impact on bodily functions as well. So this is extremely important, that we are biologically set up to be regulated through relationships. Okay, and kindness is one of the deregulating processes. So there we are. There is the picture of the vagus. It's called a wandering gnaw, goes all over the body. And breathing and friendliness stimulates this system. Now, when this system is stimulated, it also helps to activate the frontal cortex. It changes the organization of the brain in various ways that we won't go into tonight. So this is important. And so we can begin to think about the nature of positive feelings and its relationship to happiness. Because we know that there is what we call hedonic happiness, which is primarily the drive system. Okay? And hedonic system is okay, and I'm not against some pleasures, but the downside of the hedonic system is that it's relatively short-lasting, and it is the basis of addictive behavior, of wanting more, wanting more, wanting more, achieving more, having more, doing more. It doesn't have any natural inhibitors in it. It's also socially manipulative, and it is also a system that drives social comparison and envy. People become very envious of those who have more than them, or they compare themselves to people who have more than them. We find that the loss of hedonic tone is important in shame and depression. This feeling that I just can't achieve anything, I can't do anything. Then, of course, as you would know, it's not a very nice color, is it? Then, as you would know, eudaimoc feelings. Oh, there it is. Now, this is a very different type of positive. This is a grounding, more of a grounded type of positive emotion, which is focused much more on making a contribution, a sense of meaning and purpose, and a sense of connectedness. These three are key to a very different types of positive emotion. And these types of positive emotion, they can have excitement states in them, but generally not. They're much calmer sort of positive states. There is a downside to it, because there's always a downside, right? And the downside is that sometimes it's how people make a commitment. So making a commitment to your community is great, but people can also make a commitment to tribalism and war as group loyalty and have a loss of meaning and so on. So it's not all good. The key of all of this, I'm saying really, excuse me, is learning to use wisdom to drive our minds. So there we are. That's coming back to compassion. So what we're going to do now is enough of talking, and we're now going to do some exercises together, practices together, to begin to bring the way in which our bodies can help our minds, and then how we can focus our intentionality. Okay? Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is called soothing rhythm breathing, which is a pattern of breathing designed to stimulate your vagus. All right? And we're going to see if we can do that. We're going to do vagal stimulation. Haha. You didn't know that, did you? You can have vagal stimulation tonight, did you? Oh, a bit of vagal stimulation. I could do with some vagal stimulation. Good. All right, now the first thing to be aware of is how your body works. When you're stressed, when there's anxiety and anger about, your body will curl inwards. Your shoulders will curl around because you're protecting the front part of your body. Okay, so when you're angry, your arms come in front of you. Okay, nobody is angry like this. Okay, come on then. Doesn't work, does it? No, it doesn't work. So you always do this, right? Same with anxiety. When you have anxiety, there's a tendency to curl the body, not open the body. And the problem with that is it crunches up the diaphragm, and then when you do that, you tend to get a breathing style which stimulates the sympathetic system a little bit. So what we're going to do is going to deliberately lift the shoulders up and back and open this area. Okay, so now I'm going to go through a series of exercises with you without stopping, because of the time constraints. But hopefully I'll give you some ideas that you can go and practice at home. So there are different breathing techniques that will do different things. So if you get interested in this, there are all kinds of different types of breathing, how you hold the breath and release the breath and so on. This is the basic one. It's the 5 and 5. So you're having 5-second breath in, 5 second out. And make sure the breath is even in and even out. When you breathe in, you stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. When you breathe out, it's the para, and it's the parasympathetic we're interested in. So we're going to do that. So as you do this, I will then guide you through some ideas and practices, and we'll see where we get to, okay? Okay, so I'm going to count you in. I'm going to go in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, no, in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I'm going to leave you on your own for a minute. And then I'm going to make some suggestions for you. And then I'm going to take you through some exercises. And then we've prepared the ground. We're going to do compassionate self-focusing. And then we're going to have another go at something, which I will tell you about later. All right, are you ready? So you're breathing in through the nose, out through the nose, just focusing on the breath. And just allowing that breath to go down into your lungs. Just feel that breath coming in and going out slowly. So in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3, in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, that's the sort of rhythm. Try and feel that rhythm. The breath coming in and the breath going out. Really feel that rhythm, deepening and slowing the breath. Now the next bit I'm going to add for you, is on the out breath, focus on the words mind slowing down, body slowing down. And you're going to use a slightly hypnotic technique, which is to expand the words. So the words will take up to 5 seconds. So it's mind slowing down. And really hear that. Mind slowing down. Body slowing down. On the out breath. Fantastic. And as you're slowing down, notice that you might be feeling slightly heavier in the chair, feeling the chair holding you up, sitting like a mountain, sitting stable, grounded. This is called groundedness. So with the out breath, we just ground this heavy feeling in the body, this stable feeling in the body. Okay, so we're now going to see what happens when we deliberately, on purpose, use our facial expressions. So we're going to do 15 seconds of neutral face and 15 seconds of friendly face. Now, when you create a friendly face, try to imagine that you're greeting somebody you really care about and just create a friendly facial expression. Okay, but try to put feeling into it if you can. Now, this is a practice, it's an imagination, but just notice what happens when you do this on purpose. Okay, so here we go. 15 seconds of just a neutral face. And now, friendly face. Really try to create that sensation of friendliness in your face. And back to neutral. And finally, friendly. Okay, that's great. Now the next thing is we're going to practice voice tone. So we're going to do neutral face and neutral voice tone. So on the out breath, you're going to say hello to yourself in a neutral way and then a friendly way. And again, your mission, should you choose to accept it, is simply to observe what happens when you deliberately change these dynamics, okay? So a neutral voice is, for me, and my name's Paul, would be, hello, Paul. Whereas a friendly one is, hello, Paul. This welcoming, practice this welcoming voice. Okay, so let's see if we can experience what happens when we, on purpose, use our voice tones and our facial expressions and just notice, be observant of what actually happens. Don't try to make anything happen. If nothing happens, that's okay too. But just see what happens when you deliberately move your facial muscles and your voice tones. So off we go then. So neutral face and voice. Okay, and now switch to friendly facial expression and just welcoming yourself in a really friendly way. You can do that loud if you want to, but generally no, you just do it inside your own head. Okay. All right, so that's just to give you, so we'll just come back together for a moment. That's just to give you a feel. Okay, so the idea then is that you can begin to practice being aware of how you hold your body, your typical facial expressions, and the tone of your thinking. So I know Lord Lair's very keen on cognitive therapy. One of the things that we found in the 80s when we were doing cognitive therapy, that people could generate alternative thoughts, right? But the tone of those thoughts was hostile. So a depressed person may say, okay, I think I'm a failure, but really I can see I've succeeded in holding down a job and I've got a family that care about me. But when I ask them, so how do you hear that in your head? Speak to me, speak it out as you hear it. They'd say, well, come on, you're doing cognitive therapy, right? You've got a family who care about you. You've held down a job, haven't you? Look at the evidence. What? So the first thing that we started doing in CFT was simply warm up, get people practicing friendly voice. And it actually proved to be much more difficult. You know, people say, I'm not doing that, it's weak, it sounds pathetic, it's silly, I've got to make myself, all that stuff. So you practicing the voice, because when you have anxious thoughts, you'll have an anxious voice in your head. When you have angry thoughts, you'll have angry thoughts in your head and so on. So this is important. And there's a lovely video that you can watch on YouTube called Compassion for Voices. So if you want to see how this works, you just put Compassion for Voices into YouTube's and you'll see it. So, okay, so now then we've got our grounding, we've got our body, we've got our breathing, we've got our vagal system, we're bringing on the frontal cortex, we've got our voice tones. So now the last part of our parcel for the picture for tonight is intentionality. Okay? So we're going to give you compassionate intention as your identity. Okay? So now we're going to practice imagining becoming the most compassionate person you can be. This is you at your compassionate best. Now don't worry whether you think you could or you couldn't do it. Imagine you're an actor and you're going to step into this role. You're going to become this deeply compassionate person. Okay? So the idea is just to get familiar with what that would be like if you could, right? It's like imagine that you could be a pilot. What would it be like flying the plane, okay? Now you can't fly, but you can imagine. Okay, you can imagine. You can just imagine being there. All right. So this is very important. So we're going to do this imaginary practice. This is you at your compassionate best. You're going to create an image of yourself, an identity of yourself as you at your compassionate best, okay? And if we had more time, we would weave into this image your own personal views of what that would be. So, for example, my compassionate self is slightly taller, slimmer. So you can have any version you like, right? So this is you at your compassionate best. Okay, so we're going to do that now. Okay, so sit in your chair, take upright, get into your posture. And allow your breathing to settle in. Okay, so just letting the breathing, because there's a motto in the contemplative traditions which is prepare the body, respect the practice. So in some practices you have to do fasting and all the rest of it. There's a concept of allowing the body to be in the best position to do your practice. And in this practice, preparing the body means allowing it to ground and settle. And you do that with the breath in the body. Okay, so that's great. So shoulders back, open chest, 5 breaths per minute. So really feel yourself grounding into this position. Now remember your facial expressions. And now we're going to bring 3 qualities to your compassionate self. Firstly, you have today great wisdom because you know that we've all just found ourselves here with bodies that have been built for us. Some of those bodies work pretty well, for other people not so well. And brains that have been built for us. And because of the way evolution has worked, some of what goes on in our heads is pretty tricky stuff. It's difficult stuff. So you have this wisdom. The wisdom of no blame, not blaming, but wanting to take responsibility. Then the second quality is the sense of grounding, this feeling of stable, and a sense of strength in your stability. Try and sense a sense of courage, that you're stable, you're not going to be moved, you're here, rooted, grounded, settled mind. Nothing can move you from this, right? And then the third thing is your commitment. This is your commitment. May I have the courage to address suffering where I see it and the wisdom to do something about it. That's what I want, right? Really focus. This is your intention. This is your intention for this self. This self wants this. I want the courage to be able to face suffering where I see it and acquire the wisdom to know what to do. Wherever I see suffering, I'm going to try my best to be helpful and certainly not contribute to it, at least not intentionally. So just focus on this intention, this deep intention. And remember, there's a part of this which is affectionate. You know, you're creating this friendly face and this friendly voice. This is, I want this. I really, really want this. And you can imagine like a light around you if you want, and as you really focus on this wish, I want this, I want to grow this, just imagine this light oozing out of you and touching all the people around you so that they too can become their best compassionate self. They can cultivate this part of themselves. They can cultivate their wisdom, their insight into the nature of humanity, their strength and their determination to address suffering and acquire the wisdom where they can. So that's all flowing between us now. All of us want for this because we're all caught up in here. We're all passing through. Suffering can happen to any of us. We're all in the same game. But we can reach out and help each other. Just think about how much you would want that. And think about what it would be like if you lived from this part of you, when you had arguments with people, right? This part would come through. If you have an argument with somebody you care about, an angry self turns up, then they're going to just be thinking, oh, why are you arguing with me? You should listen to what I say. And angry self will want to shout. If anxious self turns up, anxious will be, oh my goodness, we don't want to argue because you never know what's going to happen. And if sad self turns up, it's, oh, this is so sad. Compassionate self, on the other hand, if you bring compassionate self, that will come with wisdom. That will come with an understanding that an argument is a twosome, not a onesome. It will come with a commitment to really address it, not to turn away, not to hide from it, but to address it in the wisest way possible. So your compassionate self will see life and see life problems in a different way to say angry self or anxious self or whatever. So just becoming familiar that this part of you, it has your inner wisdom. It holds it already. It's there. If you practice, if you cultivate, if you remind yourself, this is the person I want to become. So rather than letting anger self run your show or anxious self run your show, this is the person I'm going to cultivate. Okay? So you're bringing your wisdom, you're bringing your grounding, you're using your body, and you're using your motivation to create this compassionate intention. Okay? So compassion is about motivation, as you've seen. It's not about feeling. We have arguments with some of our American friends about this. Compassion is this intention. I want this. Okay. So just come out of that for a moment. Well done, everybody. Working hard. So we're going to do our last practice of the night. Now, remember we started this workshop with talking about a little disappointment? Okay, so now we're going to talk about the same disappointment, but this time from the position of the compassionate self. So as a listener, you're going to listen as the compassionate self. You're going to stay in that 5 breaths per minute. Just grounded, stay grounded, listening. And as the speaker, you're going to speak from this compassionate position. Okay? Right? And then we'll see what experience you have of this difficulty. So you've got 2 minutes each. So remember, no talking. But the speaker, speaking can talk. Just listening from this grounded position and notice the difference. Okay, 2 minutes, off we go. Okay, well done, everybody. So last time then, so B becomes the speaker, A becomes the listener. Remember, A, you cannot speak, but just stay in your compassionate position. Keep your breaths at 5 breaths per minute. And the speaker also from the compassionate position, using your wisdom. Right, off you go, 2 minutes. Okay, well done, everybody. Okay, so this is a very big hall, so it's difficult to get feedback for you, but one of the things I hope you have experienced is that how you talk about these difficulties really has an impact, maybe a little bit of an impact, on how you experience them. So we find that when people actually do this grounding, they actually see the disappointment or the life difficulty in a slightly different way. So the mindset that you bring to a difficulty, angry self, depressed self, anxious self, will flavor how you experience the difficulty. But if you practice this compassion position with using your body and practicing things, you'll find that you'll begin to shift the orientation to life difficulties, and you begin to shift the things that become your values and things that are important to you. So just to begin to finish now then, the compassionate motive, the key to compassion is motivation, motivation, motivation. This is key in the tradition, the bodhicitta position, the Mahayana position. As I say, some of my American colleagues, they think compassion is an emotion. Of course it isn't, because the emotion that you have if you were running into a burning house to save a baby is different to the emotion of consoling the dying person, is different to the emotion of fighting for injustice. So the emotion depends on the context. What's crucial to all of them is the motivation to address suffering and to prevent harm. That's what's the crucial thing. So may we find a way to help all beings be free of suffering and the causes of suffering. This is the bodhicitta position, this is the compassionate position, this is the Buddhist position. And may we build the wisdom to be able to do that. And the Dalai Lama has been very clear in saying that we need scientific wisdom as well. So the point about it is then, to finish off, that we are creating this inner compassionate mind that is rooted in the wisdom of the nature of mind. We call it mind awareness. There's mindfulness, right? The aware of what's, but there's also mind awareness, knowing why this goes on. I can understand why this is happening because of my mind. Then we have the grounding, the stabilizing, and the strength, the commitment, and the motivation. So these then become the core qualities for building your compassionate mind and your compassionate self, and practicing going through life, so that when you're beginning to find anger and anxiety and so forth arising, take the breath just to remember your intention. And so as the Dalai Lama said, how can you use mindfulness to bring you to intention if you have no idea what your intention is? Mindfulness just becomes a way of settling the mind, which is fine. But if you settle the mind in order to pursue an intention, may I have the strength and the courage and the wisdom to address suffering wherever I see it. That is my intention. May I have the desire to spread happiness wherever I can, just by maybe smiling at people in the street or whatever. That is my intention. Hold that intention, and that is a route to happiness. Thank you very much.
Paul, thank you so much for a wonderful talk full of practical wisdom and inspiration. I wanted to share with you the moment I particularly loved in that was, because I'm sitting on the side here, I opened my eyes when Paul encouraged us to all do a sort of friendly face, and to see a room full of people sat there calmly with this joyous smiles on their faces was really rather special. We've got time for some questions. Paul has got to get away because he's got to catch a train back to Derby this evening, so we're going to have to wrap up fairly promptly at 5:30 as planned. And although I'm sure Paul will have a few words to say on the way out, I hope you'll be able to respect his need to get on a train back to Derby. But let's try and take some questions. I'm sure you'd like to ask a few things. So if you'd like to show hands, there are microphones. Let's try and keep these brief and let a few people ask things. So who'd like to start us off? Lady here with a stripy top on. Thanks.
How can you help somebody who is very hard on themselves and really lacking in self-compassion to be more compassionate to themselves? I'm thinking of a person who I'm close to who I really want to be able to help her, and I have trouble getting through.
Okay, so that's a great question. One thing is, come to my clinic. Do you remember I mentioned fears, blocks and resistances Okay, so the most important thing is if you try to create facilitators trying to lift it, you often end up with headbanging. We need to understand what are the fears, blocks, and resistances. So what is the greatest fear of giving up self-criticism? What would you be most frightened? What will happen to you if you give it up, right? Because people hold it. Now, it's very important because, for example, I'll give you an example. If people's self-criticism has been born in the context of a hostile parent, they can really struggle. Now, you might, I was going to say you probably remember the Aztecs, but you wouldn't because you weren't alive then. But the Aztecs believed there were these powerful gods in the sky and they would control the famines and all the rest of it. So when you believe there are powerful others who can hurt you or help you, the thing you need to do is to bring them on side. So the Aztecs would sacrifice all kinds of things, people. Well, a lot of the priests were men, and they thought, well, what would I like if I was a god? Oh, a couple of virgins, you can't go wrong with them, can you? So poor old virgins got sacrificed. Now, the point of the story is this, and this is a typical way humans deal with aversive authority. If the following year the famines were as bad as ever, what would they do? Did the priests go onto the altar and say, "Oi, you bastards, where's the bloody rains? We gave you our best versions, you cheating toads"? No, that didn't happen. What would happen is they'd go to blame themselves. What have we done? What have we done to upset you? Now, children who learn that self-blaming style, what have we done? What have we done to upset you? When children grow up and they become classic self-blamers and self-critical people, you try and relieve it. Unless you get into this deep fear of their anger to the other, it's a bit of Freudian stuff, really. It gets stuck. So, do by all means try to help them, but the key thing is recognizing that it's being held in place by inhibitors, okay? And therefore, it's getting into what is the fear of giving up this criticism, and sometimes people are incredibly frightened to give it up. It's tricky. So that, but it's good to try to help.
Are there any, on that note, I know people in this room really want to help others around them often. Are there any resources online or anything that you can refer people to?
So
that people could
the
use?
Compassionate Mind Foundation has resources, and we do, and we have some demonstrations of people talking about criticism that they don't want to give up because they think it's important to them, they deserve it, all this stuff, usual stuff.
So we'll send a link round to the Compassionate Mind Foundation in the follow-up email tomorrow. Thank you for that question.
It's a great question.
Who else has got a hand up? There's one at the back there, actually, I can see. Anything upstairs?
Hi there. I just wondered if there was an evolutionary reason for anger being so sticky.
Well, it's a great question. I think a lot of your threat system stuff is sticky. It's like Velcro, Rick Hansen says Velcro. But possibly because conflicts in nature are sometimes not easily resolved. I mean, there's fights go on and so on and so on. So ensuring that the angry individual has two choices. They either have to win, therefore they stay angry and they keep fighting the subordinate, whatever it is, until the subordinate submits. Or they themselves have to decide, I'm not going to win this, I've got to submit. So you either win or you lose. So for many animals, they're either stuck in that position, they have to keep going, or they will lose. And this is very true with primates, actually, if they get into conflicts, fights with each other. Until one really submits there. So it's an interesting question, this, but it is a very interesting question, but it's quite harmful. Anger is quite a harmful emotion to the body, actually.
Thank you for that, Izzy. And then there's a lady up here. We haven't got any microphones upstairs. So if you'd like to shout out your question, sorry, do you want to just we'll try and repeat it?
Yeah, I just wondered about your book about compassion burnout for those compassion burnout and for those that are helping professionals and what's going on there and how to shift that.
Compassion burnout. This is a wonderful question because in reality...
I'm not sure if everyone heard it. So it's about what's going on with compassion burnout in the helping professions particularly,
Okay, so this is one of the things because we've done I published some papers on this actually. There's no such thing, or it's very rare. What there is system burnout. Now we have done studies with our nurses, acute nurses. Are you burned out because of all the pain you're seeing? No, I'm burnt out because they're downgrading me, because I have to see too many patients, because I can't be compassionate enough. I want to give my patients more time. I want to give them better care. I go home and I think, oh, I wanted to do that. I wanted to do that. It's not the suffering we experience. It's the fact that we are constantly being constrained and we don't feel supported. That's what happens in the health service. And there's a very interesting study done in the Red Cross and that go into war areas. And they said you get compassionate fatigue. Now, sometimes you do. You generally get compassionate fatigue if people see a lot of suffering over and over again. But again, what came out of those studies was the fact that what really annoyed them was the organization that constrained them, that they weren't able to work in the way that they wanted to work. They were constantly being moved, that they weren't able to develop supportive systems. And certainly when I worked in the health service, they were always breaking up teams and breaking up systems. You can't work like that. You must have a supportive team around you, right? Very important. You must feel supported. You must feel valued in what you're doing. So I think it's a fantastic question. It's very rarely the person, it's normally that they're very angry and tired and exhausted because of all the strain and stress that's been put on them. And it's often that they would want to be more compassionate, not less. I don't know if you've found that. Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? So we've got to be careful with this because it's very easy to blame the nurses or the doctors. But actually, in reality, it does happen, but it's much rarer than people think.
What a nice, compassionate answer. I'm afraid, folks, that we're going to have to wrap things up there because we did promise to finish this at 8:30. So before we just give Paul one more recognition of our great thanks for him. Oh, well, let's do that now.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me this. Thank you. Thank you. That's great.